And earlier I spoke with Dr. Caroline Heldman about this. She's a professor of politics at Occidental College. Here's part of our conversation.
I think it's a bigger issue with the American political system, one that George W. Bush also encountered. I will go as far as to say that I think the country is somewhat ungovernable at this point in time because of the heightened polarization that has been really led by political elites and by media elites. So I think it's very difficult, regardless of what side of the political aisle you are on, to accomplish an agenda. And President Obama had a very ambitious agenda, so I'm not surprised that he hasn't been able to accomplish much of it.
As far as the American political system, which issues do you see as playing the most leading role in what you call is an ungovernable situation? Is it the two-party political system, as Jesse Ventura said in Anastasia Churkina's report, do you think?
Well, I think that the heightened partisanship of the two-party system is certainly lending to a lack of compromise. We saw with the near-government shutdown that both sides were relatively unwilling to go the distance until they were really forced to by public opinion and the fear that they were going to get blamed. I think this will happen again and again. I also see, of course, the influence of corporate money in politics. For example, President Obama's health care reform was a big disappointment for those on the left because he didn't include a public option. He didn't pay for it with, elimination of the Bush tax cuts on the wealthy. He let those extend on, and so he didn't pay for it. He didn't make it really broadly accessible. And so I think that's one really clear example where corporate America is having this huge influence. But we can't discount the Supreme Court that passed Citizens United, allowing corporations to dump an unlimited amount of funding into the political system. So it's actually more compromised now than it has ever been.
And I'm assuming you would expect this to continue to get worse as the political elections cycles go on. I'm curious, Jesse Ventura, one of his points was there needs to be another option, there needs to be another party. But along the lines of what you were just saying, if there was another viable party, another viable choice, what would keep them from being beholden to the same corporate interests that you essentially need to have donate to you because you have to get elected? You need a lot of money to run for president.
And Lauren, there you have it. So it doesn't matter if we have 2 political parties or 5 political parties. If they're all owned by corporate America, and I don't think that that's an overstatement, then the system will not work for the American public. And add to that corporate manipulation of the American public in terms of party polarization with really polarized news outlets. So we have people up in arms over things that they used to be able to have a discussion about with their neighbor over the fence 10, 15 years ago. So I see it extending beyond just their role in government, but also in setting the tenor for how we have a political discussion in the nation. And I think that we are just at an all-time low in terms of our ability to talk to one another on the other side of the political aisle.
I wonder what you think about the 4-year election cycle, because as soon as a candidate gets in office, it's just a very small amount of time before they have to start considering their re-election and what all of their decisions mean to the campaign process.
Right, Lauren, and you're bringing up a point that it really puts it back in the hands of the American public in terms of blame, that we have to constantly be sold and targeted. So a president is always campaigning as soon as he or she gets into office. I mean, there's just no break in that. So President Obama didn't start his campaign a week ago. He started his campaign the moment that he got into office. And we require that of candidates. I mean, imagine a political system where candidates are honest and really tell us what's going on and say, look, I'm representing these corporate interests, so I'm not going to vote in favor of this. Or, President Obama saying, well, I could do this, but then I'd have to compromise on this. If he told us the truth, then we would impeach him. We would impeach any candidate that really told us the truth. And that's where we are in American politics, and that's why I think it's rather ungovernable at this point. We have a very unique system where the branches are supposed to keep each other in check, yet presidential power has actually very much overshadowed both congressional and judicial power, and George W. Bush did a lot to further unconstitutional presidential power when it came to torture, extraordinary rendition, getting into wars without congressional approval, warrantless wiretapping, etc. And President Obama has just picked up those tools of power and kept them, and that is unconstitutional. So not only do we see the system broken in terms of corporate interests, we also see it broken in terms of the massive expansion of presidential power. The framers would be rolling over in their graves. at this expansion. It's simply not the system that they had in mind when they created the U.S. Constitution.
And just to follow up with that, when you talk about security, because you mentioned presidential power, we see now the United States involved in Libya, which is what you could call a war that the president did not go to Congress for. I'm curious also, he said he was going to end the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. When it comes to security, do you think that this has been political strategy? Do you think that when the president got into office, he just realized that you can't just pull out and the reality of the situation sunk in and drove the decision? What do you think has happened on national security?
Well, Lauren, I think you hit the nail on the head that he was a relatively inexperienced candidate, and not that he is not a great leader, because I actually think he's pretty good in terms of getting what he can get done in this ungovernable environment. But he gets into office and discovers, look, you can't just pull out. If you do that, it's going to leave all of these people in the lurch. People in Afghanistan will be in harm's way, and I'm very much in favor of getting out of Afghanistan. I think a diplomatic approach is the only one we can take, but getting out of Iraq and Afghanistan will take years. And so making the campaign promise that he would get out immediately was simply not something, it's simply something he shouldn't have promised. And Gitmo, the same thing, right? He promised that he would be closing Guantanamo, and then he encountered all of this political opposition, even from his own party, because they didn't want prisoners coming to the prisons in their backyard. So NIMBYism kicked in, right? Not in my backyard. So I think President Obama has had this steep learning curve where he promised a lot, thought he could do a lot, got into office and found out that he is only one deckhand on a very big boat, and it's hard to turn that ship.
A lesson in managing expectations from Dr. Caroline Heldman, professor of politics at Occidental College. Now